In this lesson, you will learn how to modify the style of elements in Bootstrap Studio. We will begin with the Editor panel and give a short introduction to CSS. Then, we will cover the Appearance panel, which is the key to visual editing in the app. Click the bottom of the application window to expand the Editor panel. Here you see two tabs. The first shows the HTML code that the app generates for you. The second is the Styles tab. Here you can see the CSS that affects the selected element. If you are not familiar with CSS, this is the code that tells web browsers how to visually display and style the content of a website, controlling things like colors, fonts, and layouts. We won't be explaining CSS in detail in this lesson, but here are the basics. Each CSS block has a selector that targets elements on the page and a list of rules. If you hover over the selector, Bootstrap Studio will highlight the element that it matches. Notice the locked Bootstrap label in the bottom right corner. This indicates that this CSS block is defined in the Bootstrap framework file and can't be edited. If we click the Create button, we can make our own blocks. They have a blue border on the left and can be edited freely. Let's add a red background. On the bottom right, you can see that the block is contained in the Styles CSS file. This is the default style sheet file of your project. You can create as many style sheet files as you need and pick any name you want for them. To open the file, double-click it here or click the label. This will bring you to the file and highlight the CSS block. We will be working in the Styles tab in this lesson, so we can close this file. You can remove the rule by leaving the rule empty and pressing the Enter key. You can also click here and remove the entire block. Let's add a few paragraphs to the page. Let's say we wish to make the first two paragraphs red and the last one blue. If we create a block and hover the selector, you can see that it will match all three paragraphs. So when we make the text red, all paragraphs on the page will be affected. We need a different type of selector that matches only particular elements. This is where class names come into play. Click here to expand the Attributes panel. This lets you add IDs, class names, and attributes to elements. You can give an element whatever class name you wish. Let's call ours red text. Notice that I use a hyphen as a separator to keep it a single class name. Copy and paste it to the next paragraph as well. We can now change the block. To use a class name inside a selector, we need to prefix it with a dot like this. Now only the first two paragraphs are red. To make the third paragraph blue, we could also give it a class name. But let's try something else. We will give it an ID instead. IDs need to be unique on the page, meaning that only one element can have a specific ID. Let's give it a MeBlue ID. Now, when we create a block, Bootstrap Studio will see that it has an ID and pre-fill it as a selector right away. IDs need to have a hash character as a prefix when used in a selector. When we write the color property, only the third paragraph will be affected. There is another way to give only the third element a blue color. This is done with the Style attribute. You can see it represented by this block. If I remove the MeBlue block by clearing the selector and pressing Enter, and then write the color here, it has the same effect. The element Style block behaves differently from the rest. It is not added in a CSS file, but is instead written directly to the element HTML. This gives it higher priority over other CSS blocks. We will cover more in our CSS lesson later in the video series. But for now, you know enough to make basic edits with CSS. This will allow you to use the Appearance panel effectively, which is the main topic of this lesson. You can find the Appearance panel on the right side of the application window. It gives you easy visual controls for editing CSS. The blue color we just wrote is displayed here. If I change it to green, you can see that the style block is updated here. I can increase the font size like this, and the CSS rule will be inserted. I can also make the element bold and center the text. The correct CSS rules are automatically inserted, making it quick and easy to customize the design. The most important control in the Appearance panel is at the top. This is where you select which CSS block to modify. The list contains all editable CSS blocks that match the element. At the moment, this is only the style attribute. If we select one of the other paragraphs and click the drop-down, we have access to the red text class we created earlier. Now, when we modify the appearance, the CSS rules will be inserted in that block and affect both paragraphs since they share the class name. When we press the plus button, we can create a new class name by prefixing it with a dot, like we did with the CSS selector. Now, when I apply the change, Bootstrap Studio does two things. First, it creates the CSS block. Second, it sees that the element is missing the class name and adds it. The element now has both the red and underline classes. When I activate the underline, it gets the style. If I select the third paragraph and try to create the Underline Me block, Bootstrap Studio will assign the class name to the element. But it won't create a new block since one already exists with this selector. We can now control both of our paragraphs like this. Once you get used to it, you can customize your elements entirely from the Appearance panel without manually creating blocks and assigning class names. Now let's see some of the options that are available. At the top of the panel is a visualization of the element's dimensions, margins, and paddings. Lower down, we have the Layout group. You can set a width and height for an element here, but keep in mind that you should let the element adapt to the width of the page instead of giving a size in pixels. We will cover this in our responsive design lesson. However, there are cases where an explicit size is necessary. Remember that the values need to have px at the end like this. Writing only a number won't work. If you expand these two controls, you can see related options for minimum and maximum width and height. These can come handy if you wish the element to grow to a maximum size, but not larger. We will use this in our responsive design lesson later in the series. Here you can control the margins and paddings. This is the blank space around the element. In most cases, instead of these options, it's a better idea to use the margin and padding resize tool like this. We will cover this in our responsive design lesson. Next is the font group. You can set various text-related properties here. You can see that the options that have been changed are shown in blue. You can middle-click like this to reset them. You can also press this button and reset the entire group. Under Color Controls, you can see these color presets. These are CSS variables that hold Bootstrap's theme colors. It is generally a good idea to use these instead of picking colors at random, since the theme colors can be changed from a central place. We will explain these later in the series. Of course, nothing is stopping you from picking any color with the color picker. You can select a color here. Change the opacity like this. The Design tab shows the theme colors. Next is the Favorites tab. You can press this icon to mark a color as a favorite and save it for later. Click it again to remove. And lastly, the Library tab gives you a large palette of colors to choose from if you need inspiration. To select the color, click the button. When a text box holds a numeric value like this, you can place the caret between the digits and use your keyboard arrows to change the value. You can also drag here to modify the size. This pale gray text is a placeholder with the current value of the property. In the case of the font, this is the default font stack that is applied by the Bootstrap framework. We will explain how to set custom fonts in our textual components lesson. Next is the background group. Here you can set a solid background color like this, or you can add images and gradients. When adding an image, you can either paste a URL here or press this button to pick an image from your project. Since we haven't imported any images yet, let's pick a stock photo. It will be imported in your project and placed as a source. To see the entire image, we need to set the size to contain. We can switch off repeat like this and center it. Let's add a gradient. You can pick colors for the color stops and change the angle. We can change the order in which backgrounds are rendered by dragging, and remove them like this. Next is the border group. Here you can pick the style and color of borders. The important part is this direction control. It determines which border you are editing. When the center area is active, you are editing all sides. This will add a yellow border all around the element. And we can select only the right side and make it green. Drag here to give it rounded corners. The next group will show a shadow beneath the element. You can control the size like this. Text shadows are similar, but they show the shadow underneath the letters, not the entire element. We will leave the positioning group for the CSS lesson later in the series, and instead proceed with the transform group. Here you can apply transformations in 3D space. Perspective determines how pronounced the effect is. Translate moves the element around. You can also rotate around specific axes. And also scale up or down. Transformations like these can be useful in some designs, but you shouldn't overuse them. The next group is filters. You have quite a few dials to play with and get interesting effects. You have opacity, blur, contrast, saturation, hue, and more. We will use them to make a hover effect in a minute. The backdrop filters group is nearly identical to filters, except that it affects the area behind the element. We will come back to it in the navbar lesson, where we use it to create a frosted glass background effect. The Bootstrap theme group lets you override Bootstrap colors, fonts, and other variables which will affect the selected component and its children. We will come back to this in our theme customization lesson. We will finish this video with the last group in the appearance panel. It is called transition. This is a very powerful CSS property that creates smooth animations between changes in two CSS blocks. To see how it works, we first have to create a new CSS block. We will add colon and hover at the end. This will make the CSS code activate only when we hover over the element with the mouse. I will then add a blur and saturation filter. Now switch back to the style target. You can see the effect when I hover. The change is immediate. But what if we want an animated transition instead? To do this, set the transition property to 0.2 seconds. With this one property, we now have a smooth transition between the two states. This is a great way to create interactive effects. Thank you for watching this lesson. Check out our other videos to learn more about Bootstrap Studio.